Well, hello there. I'm Jennifer Blomquist. Welcome to HealthLine. I'm so glad you joined us this evening. I'm so excited about the show. I always love HealthLine. It's always a great program. But we have some returning guests, and they are registered dietitians, and I love all the information that they have to share with us. We always get a lot of calls when we have our registered dietitians with us. So that's why that phone number is up at the bottom of the screen. We are welcoming any questions you may have. Maybe you want some advice. This is the way to do it. Get some free advice. Maybe even have some concerns about a loved one or a friend. Give us a call. So the number is 969-2720. If you're outside of Fort Wayne, put an 866 in front of there and it will still be a free call. And you have two options when you call in. My favorite option is that you talk to our guests live during the show, which is nice because you can interact with them and maybe they need more information from you to better answer your question. So that's an option. If you're not comfortable with that, or maybe you would prefer to just give your question to the call screener and then have us, I can relay it to our guests tonight and then they can answer it that way. So either way, don't be nervous. They're not going to throw you on the air. The second you call, you talk to a very nice call screener and you guys can figure out what works best for you. So let's go ahead and introduce you to our guests tonight. You may recognize them because they've been here before. So sitting next to me is Adrianne Kartholl. She's a registered dietitian, and so is the guest next to her, Kayleigh Shoaff. So thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
And actually, today I thought, I'm going to get in so much trouble if I tell them what things I was eating today, because March is National Nutrition Month, and I had a rough day, and I was eating on the go, and I'm not even going to share what I had today, but it was not good. But that's, I think, the story for a lot of people, and I don't want to use it as an excuse, but I do a lot of times say, I don't have time, to make a salad, or I don't have time to do such and such. So I think we're just all busy, and we don't think about nutrition, and we probably should.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult just in the daily life with work and children and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I think one thing that a lot of us have probably found really helpful is meal planning, yes, as much as you can. And it can be really overwhelming at first. So sometimes even recommending just trying to start with one day a week and kind of working up for there, or even batch cooking your meals. And that actually in the long run can actually save money as well.
That's just it. I mean, food is so expensive. And eating, I think throughout time, people have always said, it's cheaper to buy, like a box of, noodles and cheese dinner, instead of making a salad and maybe having some fresh chicken and things like that. But I guess if you do plan maybe and look for sales, you could save some money.
That's usually what I like to do. I also do all of my grocery shopping as a pre-order. So I can really plan things out, and I don't just make impulse buys at the grocery store. And the nice thing with some of this pre-ordering and pickup grocery shopping is they'll have online deals, and you can help center some of your meals around those. You can pick a protein, maybe a vegetable that's on sale, and use that to build your meal, one of your meals for the week.
This is a great time of year too to start, I think, talking about, better eating habits and so forth, because fish is so healthy and it's Lent. So there's always a good sale on some kind of fish. I mean, you can get the frozen fish sticks, I guess, but the fresh fish, which is really, I'm always shocked at how quickly it cooks. My kids love salmon and cod, and I just clean it off. There's some Cajun spice that we put on it, and it takes literally like 10 minutes on the grill on a piece of foil. You don't have any dirty pans to wash. So I always feel like Lent is kind of a good time to start thinking about stuff like that, because fish is so easy to make if you like fish.
Yeah, and along that line too, especially this time of year with it being on sale, a lot of products freeze really well. Protein, so fish, chicken, beef products, all of that freeze really well. But also when you look at breads, cheeses, and again, your vegetables and things like that. So, sometimes, like Kayleigh said, when you're looking at the sales, if there's a better deal on something and it's something that your family eats on a regular basis, then it might be better in the long run to kind of stock up on some of those essential items.
And I feel like the kids do mimic what the parents eat. And, a lot of times if you see a family shopping, you can kind of tell that they're all kind of doing the same thing. They'll all have the same similar body type. They're either, a lot of times all heavy or thin. I mean, I feel like as a family, you mimic what the other people eat a lot of times.
And I think really establishing those family routines at mealtime and just making it all about we're here together having a meal that helps build those healthy habits for your children, you know, later on in life as well. Just centering, you know, putting a good feeling around food in general and helping them build a good relationship with it.
Sure.
Yeah, we really are, you know, we say you're your children's first teachers, and it definitely speaks with that as well.
Before we go further, we have a lot more that we're going to talk about, but we want you to call in and answer, ask questions at any time. So I'm so glad somebody did call in. Carol called in. She wanted me to ask the question for her. She said she has kidney stones, and she wanted to know if there are certain foods that she should avoid to help her situation.
This depends on what kind of kidney stones you have.
I didn't know there were different kinds. I guess.
There are different kinds.
Okay.
Sometimes they recommend that you start including something acidic. There are other times where you just need to increase your fluid intake. It's very dependent on what's the cause of the kidney stones, what kind are they. It's a little bit of a tough question to answer without knowing someone's full medical history.
Okay. Yeah, I had always heard there were some juices, when you said like acidic, there were some juices maybe that would help the situation, but I had never really heard about foods. I mean, would food be, you know, have an impact on that kind of condition?
Yeah, like Kayleigh said, but a lot of it, again, kind of depends on the specific kind. So without knowing, you know, if you're working with a nephrologist or, you know, as a physician, you know, finding that information out would be really, really good to be able to kind of know what route that you'd want to take with that.
Sure. Well, and I'm sure we've talked about this before as registered dietitians. Sometimes people don't want to go see a registered dietitian because they're thinking, oh, it's going to be boring, low fat. All I'm going to eat is lettuce. But I'm always amazed when you guys are talking about things you can do to give flavor to foods, but still keep it healthy. I mean, there's a lot that's available.
Yeah, and I think, and I mean, I'll say Kayleigh will agree with me on this. You know, I think our biggest thing that we want our patients to know is that we're here to help more than anything. And when I'm meeting with a family or a patient for the very first time, you know, letting them know that there's no wrong answers in our office, that the more information we have, then the more that we're going to be able to
They should
help.
be honest.
Yeah, honesty is really, really key. And, you know, that there's a balance to everything. You know, it is not realistic for her and I to say, you know, and say you could never have, you know, food X, Y, and Z ever again, but that consistently we're trying to make those healthier habits and going from there.
And I feel like if you deprive yourself of something, I mean, you're more likely to just, if you're trying to stick to maybe some kind of a diet or regimen, I feel like you're going to fall off that track because you know, you just start craving that. If you say, I'm never going to have chocolate again, I mean, in my life, that would be devastating. You know, I would have to have some, and then if I totally deprive myself of it, I'm probably going to eat way too much, you know, when I just have that craving.
And I think having those never statements around foods also kind of puts those certain foods on a pedestal where they seem more important than other foods because you can't have them. So we don't like to use never statements. There's always room in a diet to fit something in, like chocolate, you know. You can choose dark chocolate, milk chocolate, you can just limit how much you have in one sitting. And I think not restricting yourself over a long period of time from that food is gonna make you want it more.
I was gonna say, I met a nurse years ago and she had lost well over 100 pounds. I mean, she totally turned her life around. And then she kind of started a program. She worked for an endocrinologist, and so she was working with patients. And so she had her 100, she called it the 100 Club, and she would take them out to like a nice dinner, you know, if you lost 100 pounds. But it was really interesting to hear some of the things she did, because she said at one point she had a long drive between Fort Wayne and she was going to Northwest Ohio to work. And she said, I would eat 6 donuts. She said, you can. She's like, before you know it, those 6 donuts are gone. But then, you know, she was talking about just her changing her whole mindset, but also like she started keeping a piece of dark chocolate in the freezer, and like every other day she would just have, it was a small square, but she would have it like with a cup of coffee or something. And she said, it sounds silly, but she's like, I would think about that chocolate because that was like her reward. And there were a lot of other things, you know, that, I mean, she started getting more physically active too, but it seemed like it was a lot of little changes that made, it wasn't like, it was drastic, I guess, in the long run, but but looking at the small picture, it was just small changes.
And I think, speaking really to any lifestyle change, because that's what, when we do look at nutrition, it's really a lifestyle because it's something that we want to be sustainable. It can be really daunting and overwhelming. And so, setting small, realistic, and measurable goals, kind of gives you that momentum to continue to go and to be consistent with those changes than if you set, a really lofty, goal to kind of start with. It just makes it that much harder to feel like you're able to maintain that over time.
Sure.
So consistency really is key.
So I would, use an example. If I had a patient who was needing to follow a lower sodium diet for heart disease, let's say they were eating bacon 5 days a week.
Yeah.
I think it would be completely unrealistic to tell that person, well, you need to stop that immediately.
Okay.
It's let's try to just cut it back to three days a week.
Yeah.
Start there, and then just make those small changes as they accomplish their goals.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, losing weight, it's like you're not going to lose 20 pounds in a week. Or if there's some diet promising that, it's not a good diet.
It's not a real thing.
It's going to be small.
And I think, as a society, we want that quick fix. But when you're looking at your health overall, that's just not attainable. That's not something that's going to give you long-term success.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, we do have another caller who wanted to ask a question. And just a reminder to everyone watching, we only have our guests till 8 o'clock, a little before 8 o'clock. The time goes quickly. So call sooner rather than later if you have a question. And Kathleen had one. She wanted to know if you have any diet suggestions for someone who had liver damage from taking acetaminophen, which is an over-the-counter pain reliever.
You want to go ahead?
So I guess it depends on what is the liver damage and what's the extent. If we're talking about cirrhosis, then it depends on the severity of the cirrhosis and how long you've had that disease. Generally, we would recommend someone with cirrhosis to follow a lower sodium diet. If it's very advanced cirrhosis, you'll need higher calorie, higher protein. But the lower sodium is still recommended. And then also, if you're not very far along with the liver damage, you would want to make sure you have good blood sugar control, make sure you're keeping an eye on your carbs, because that does play into liver disease. So it depends on what type of liver damage we're talking about.
And I think something else, if we're looking at damage overall in the body or inflammation, really trying to incorporate foods that are high in antioxidants. So blueberries, berries, lots of fruits and vegetables can definitely help give that. And it's not a quick fix. It's not going to take away the damage, but it can help and maybe even help just with inflammation overall from not progressing.
Yeah, I'm sure that you work with people that have all different, it's not just that they're overweight, but they have medical conditions. And so I'm assuming, do you have to come up with it's probably not a cookie cutter plan for any patient. I mean, I think people think you're just going to hand them a chart, like the food pyramid. But it sounds like you have to, if you're meeting with a patient, you have to tailor, custom tailor it.
Absolutely.
I've had a couple, encounters recently with patients where they say, well, I was told by this doctor I need to follow this diet, but then my other doctor for this reason told me to follow this other diet. How do I make these work? This is really restrictive. And I just have to say, okay, this is what the most important and most pressing condition that you have is. So let's focus on that one. So like, for example, if someone had diabetes and renal disease, we're going to focus on carbs and lower sodium.
And it can be done. I mean,
it can be done.
I know my grandparents, who unfortunately have passed away years ago, but they grew up in an era where my grandma never put salt on the salt shaker on the table. I remember my dad saying when he was dating my mom, he was like, "Where's the salt?" And my grandma would say, "You don't need salt. I put enough in." And my dad said, "Oh yeah, she did." He would drink like a gallon of water afterward because it was so heavy on butter and salt. It was just, but that was just the way they made food back then. And as they got older, and one of them had heart disease and other heart issues, they had to drastically change, and they did it, but I witnessed how challenging it was because they were used to they didn't look at any label, they just dumped this in or that, and they had to completely change it. But it can be done. I've witnessed it. So.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of, I mean, one thing I love about our field is that even compared to 20 years ago with research, what we know about food and how it affects our body and, you know, the kinds of foods that we eat, you know, the recommendations are always changing. So it is challenging at times to keep up with that. But again, it, you know, it gives us information of how to be the healthiest versions of ourselves.
Well, and you know, we were talking about starting young, and all of my kids have played sports, mostly baseball and softball, and they talk about, especially as the boys get to high school age, I am impressed by how much information they'll say. Something like, it's just kind of weird when you're not used to it. Your child comes in the kitchen and says, what's our protein going to be today? You know?
And that makes my heart so happy.
Yeah. Or, you know, now a couple of the boys are in college and they're in apartments, so they're doing their own cooking, and it's just, I'll talk to them and they'll just talk. They talk a lot about protein, but it's just funny, and I'm amazed. You know, a lot of it we taught them, some of it, but there's just a lot. If you have children involved in, you know, sports and stuff, I think especially as they get older, these coaches are emphasizing to them, what you got to put good stuff into your body.
And for me specifically, working with a pediatric population, really trying to get not only my patients but families to understand. I use the analogy a lot of putting, you know, fuel in a race car.
Sure.
That we're not going to just put any gas. You know, that a race car takes very specialized fuel, and kind of relating that, especially with athletes, of how your performance is going to be. But also kind of trying to give that knowledge to parents that, you know, as you're teaching and working through this with them, then when they grow up and they're out on their own, you know, they're hopefully going to have that knowledge to make better choices.
And you've talked before. I think your kids. I mean, you're always telling me the things that your kids say. So obviously, what you do rubs off on them. But you know, if you get them involved in the kitchen and cooking, a lot of especially when they're younger, they think it's fun. You can make it fun, I guess.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you're always going to run into, you know, bits of picky eating and, you know, them having opinions and thoughts. And I think, you know, some of that is just being a child, but just trying to be that consistent voice in the background.
Our job as parents is to present them with the foods, and they get to pick from their plate, this is what I'm going to eat. And that just helps them really understand, I'm in charge of this. This is my job. I'm going to eat what I need right now. And kids are really good at that kind of intuitive eating.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it does stick with them. So we had somebody else who called and wanted me to ask their question for them. So this was from Kim, and Kim wanted to know if protein drinks are a good replacement for a meal, and are they healthy? We were talking about, you know, eating on the run. I do see a lot of people with these different kinds of, you know, they look like a little milk bottle. So.
Kind of a loaded question.
I was just going to say the same thing. It's a bit of a loaded question.
Good ones out there?
So there are. So one thing when we look at these protein supplement drinks is, yes, they're a great source of protein, but I want to encourage you to look at, you know, how much fat, how much added sugar is in that product, how much fiber is in that product. You know, healthy fats, fiber, you know, all of that is going to help us stay fuller for longer, even with the protein. And kind of taking that into consideration. So there definitely are, you know, ones out there that, you know, I recommend, but again, just being mindful of exactly what you're picking up, but even challenging that, like, you know, when we are on the go, what is, you know, a protein source that we could take with us, even adding in a piece of fruit, so you're getting that whole food, that whole, you know, that fiber, and everything else, trying to kind of balance out more than just the protein aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I think protein drinks can be kind of tricky. You know, is it actually keeping you full, which is what the intent is, or could you be more full from using something like avocado toast or something that has a little bit more substance? I know that when I drink something, it doesn't fill me up. So I've never gotten into protein drinks just because solid food actually fills me up more. And the whole idea with some of these protein drinks is to help you feel full longer. Can we accomplish that with just some easier snack options at home for you to choose? So like nuts or cheese, that kind of thing. Using that instead of a protein drink if the protein drink just isn't keeping you full.
Yeah.
I just feel like there's such a big push with, they have all these, little appliances, different kinds of like blenders and things. I mean, gosh, some of them are like $400. I don't know. I'm happy with a $25 one that we got as a wedding gift like 25 years ago. But they, I see this, it seems like there's a big push for like the smoothies, or I don't know, just making like a drink where, people put kale and stuff like that. I mean, some of them look good. Some of them, I don't know. The ones with kale in them, it just doesn't look that great.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely an option, and something that like let's say in the morning, if we're going to stop through the drive-through versus try to make something at home, using a smoothie that has a Greek yogurt that is high in protein, fruits, even adding in vegetables. So if kale's not your cup of tea, spinach is a great way too. That actually adds some sweetness to the smoothie. And so again, you're adding those whole foods. And I think too, there's been so much marketing lately around health foods, so something that's still relatively processed. There's a lot of processed ingredients in it, but it's marketed as it's being healthy, and really trying to encourage people to take a step back and simplify. The whole foods, you're adding that nutrition in, and more than likely it's going to help you feel fuller for longer.
Yeah. I think it can be daunting to see all of these influencers, people online, making all of these really special protein smoothies. It's not a necessity to eat healthier. Yeah. You don't have to rely on products like that to be healthy. You can accomplish that with food that you make in your kitchen. You don't need any special supplement. Some people can benefit from them, other people don't need to.
And that's, I want to talk more about that, about the social influencers and things. But they just showed me the card, so we're probably about down to 3 minutes left in the show. We could easily get a question or two in. So feel free to call if you like, 969-2720. Again, we only have our guests here for a couple more minutes. So I had heard a survey the other day that most people don't even watch. I forget what the percentage was. It was kind of alarming. Like 60 to 70% of people don't even watch anything on their television anymore. They get all their information from their phone. And of course, they're doing a lot of these, social networking type of apps and things like that. And I know my daughter was showing me ones like about different things you can do with fruit. Now, they were all good ideas, but I'm sure there's some out there that's not good. And people see other people doing this, and then they think, oh, this is probably just some average person, but they follow their advice.
Yeah. I really try to encourage really looking at where the source is coming from. And even on social media, if there's somebody, page that you're on, click in and find out. Most professionals will always have their credentials listed. Okay. And if they're a credential that maybe you don't recognize, like RDN, you can do a quick search and kind of figure out if this is legitimate or not. Oftentimes they'll cite research and looking, where is this research coming from? Okay. Is it just kind of like a poll, or is there actual like peer-reviewed journal articles that are backing this up, things like that.
Yeah. Evidence-based is a phrase that we use a lot in our profession, and that's what we use to give out advice. We use evidence-based information, whereas some of these influencers online, while they might mean well, they may not be fully up to date or using evidence-based research to give the proper recommendations. And it's also difficult for them. They're giving this advice to the general public, not someone specifically with, say they have renal disease and diabetes. That's not what this information is geared towards. This is geared towards just general, and some of it can be helpful, but it's not a one-size-fits-all.
All right. No, you got to be careful, that's for sure. So we're getting a call coming in, I believe, from John. I'm going to see if we can squeeze this in. He wanted to know if there are any foods with high carbs that we should avoid.
So for me personally, when we look at carbs are not a bad thing. Your body has to have them. So really looking at what kind of food are we talking about? Are we talking about a piece of bread and pasta or rice, or are we talking about maybe a cookie or ice cream? So, you know, things that naturally have carbs occurring in them have natural sugar, and our bodies kind of know how to utilize that. More so if we have foods that are high in added sugars, those would be something that we would encourage you to limit, just because, again, more recent research has shown that diets very high in added sugars can lead to health complications.
All right, thank you, John, for that question. I feel bad we're out of time, but wonderful questions from everybody, and as usual, wonderful advice. So love to have you guys back again really soon. So I know you're both busy, but we'd love to have you back. So
thank you.
Again, both registered dietitians. This is Adrianne Kartholl, and next to her, Kayleigh Shoaff. So thank you so much again. And I'm Jennifer Blomquist. Thank you so much for watching tonight. Take care and have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you back here next week for another HealthLine. Take care.
The preceding program on PBS Fort Wayne was made possible in part by...
It's a new day at Parkview, another day to rise up and make life better for those around us. Whether that means pushing the boundaries of what's been possible, taking big strides, or sitting with a patient long after a shift has ended. At Parkview, we don't just do what's expected. We do what's best for you and your family. And we're determined to do it even better tomorrow. Every person, every day. That's the kind of healthcare we believe in. Parkview Health. We believe in better.